Welcome everybody to the April 2022 edition of Streets for All Happy Hour. We're very excited to have Senator Anthony Portantino with us as our special guest, and we have a few updates to get to before we get to our conversation with Anthony. We're going to give you an update on all of our efforts around state measures this year, very relevant for our guest. Give you an update on Healthy Streets LA, our ballot measure for the city of Los Angeles, announce some Council District 5 endorsements for the city of Los Angeles, tell you about some upcoming city council debates we're working on, a few wins of the month, and we'll get to our conversation with Anthony Portantino. Our icebreaker this time, and Senator, if you want to answer this, you are more than welcome to as well, if you want to pick favorites, is what piece of state legislation are you most excited about this year? So I am going to turn it over to Bubba, who can pick a favorite and give us an update on state measures. Go ahead, Bubba.
Thanks, Michael. It's definitely hard to pick my favorite piece of legislation that I'm excited about this year because we're sponsoring 5, and that would be like, I don't know, choosing my favorite child, even though I don't have any children. I don't really know what that's like, but I imagine it could be something like that. But I'm really excited, other than the ones that we're sponsoring, which I'm the most excited about. I'm probably excited about free transit for low-income folks and free transit for anyone under 25. Those are, I feel like very transformative bills. So if you go to the next slide, I can tell you more about sort of the state process at an overview. You know, each bill has to go through both houses, the Assembly and the State Senate, before it ends up at the governor's desk for a signature. And within each house, you have to go through one or more policy committees, and then it usually heads to the Fiscal Committee of Appropriations, and then goes to the floor of that house for a vote before proceeding to the next house. So that's what we have in front of us during this legislative session. And if you go to the next slide, just wanted to showcase some beautiful art that Vera Valentine, Streets for All volunteer, created for us that we haven't debuted yet. So you guys are the first to see it. I'm excited about it. Basically, we're going to put it on social media to raise awareness for the package of bills that we're supporting. I think it's a total of 17 bills. So just kind of high concept, fun color, and kind of like visually, gives an example of what each bill does. So we're excited to post these and generate some excitement. And if you go to the next slide, we've also been working on a new website. So instead of walking you through every single bill that we're supporting this year, I wanted to show you the website that you can go to. It's streetsforall.org/state, and you can check out all of our endorsed bills now. Rob Kale has been working on this, which he's done a great job. And if you go to the next slide, another fun thing we did is our legislator mobility report card. Mark Vuksevich, one of our volunteers, worked really hard on this, as well as Rob. And you're getting a first look at this. We haven't published it yet, so this is the first you're seeing of it. But this is going to go live soon, and it's basically going to rate all of our legislators, including our wonderful special guest, Anthony Portantino, on mobility and on their record on mobility, so that we can, definitely hold our legislators' feet to the fire and make sure that they're voting progressively when it comes to encouraging other mobility options in our state. So if you go to the next slide, just a reminder of 5 bills that we're very, very excited to sponsor, 4 of which are with Senator Portantino's office. So huge shout out to the senator for all of their hard work on these bills. The first is a bill to require cities to fix their deadliest streets. That one's with Portantino's office. And a tax rebate for being car free. This is the first time we're really talking openly about this one. It hasn't been introduced yet, but we are working on it with the senator's office, and we're excited for it. A bill that would basically make leading pedestrian intervals or pedestrian head starts standard in all intersections. That's AB 2264. And then the last 2 are also co-sponsored or authored by Senator Portantino, and they both deal with the issue of noise pollution. One would be in a program to basically automatically enforce illegal exhaust noise, and the second would basically put car registration on hold until cars resolve their illegal muffler tickets, and both of those are working their way through the legislature right now. And Streets for All had a huge hand in creating the majority of these bills, almost all of these bills, with Senator Portantino's office. And yeah, we're really excited about them. I think we think they're going to create more livable cities, more equitable transportation systems in California. If you go to the next slide, we do have some great news too. We have a huge group of bills that have passed through all of their first House policy committees. So referring back to that first slide about how this works, some of these bills have one or more, policy committees that they have to get through before going to appropriations. All the bills you see here that we support, I think it's like 9 of them have passed through their first House policy committees and are going to appropriations. Next. And that is our update. And if you'd like to help out on the state team, or if you just want to stay informed, please subscribe to our emails and our social channels. We're at Streets for All everywhere. And if you want to get more involved, streetsforall.org/get-involved. And we'd love to have you on the team and help push legislation through. And if you want to support us financially, maybe you don't have the time to do more, we have a bunch of fun merch that Josh designed, which I have the shirt and the hat, and they're super fun. So would highly recommend going to our merch store. And I'll hand it over to Michael.
Thanks, Bubba. My favorite child this year, I guess I shouldn't say that, I have 3 kids, is the 2 bills that we're supporting and one that we're sponsoring to have more automated enforcement of laws without the need for more armed police officers doing the enforcement. We're supporting a bill to legalize speed cameras, which would save lives. And we're also supporting a bill, like Bubba mentioned, to enforce illegally loud exhausts and prevent them from torturing our citizens. So I'm so excited to give an update on Healthy Streets LA. It's been a whirlwind month on our initiative. Just to refresh everyone's memory, in case you're not familiar, City of Los Angeles has a high injury network. On the left-hand side, these are 6% of the streets in the City of Los Angeles that account for 70% of the injuries and deaths. And on the right, you see the Mobility Plan 2035. This was passed by City Council in 2015. They have implemented almost none of it, which is why we're here today. But it includes 1,500 miles of safety improvements for people that walk, bike, take transit, and drive. And 3% in 7 years is a rate that the LA Times, when they covered us, calculated would take 200 years for the city to implement its own mobility plan when it's supposed to be done in 20. So our concept is very simple. We repave about 300 miles of streets every year as a city. So why not, when we repave and have this blank canvas, it's almost free to stripe in a crosswalk, a bus lane, a bike lane, etc. And it's a huge opportunity to accelerate everything and save money. What the city's doing right now is repaving, restriping the old configuration, ignoring its own mobility plan, and that's how we get to 3% in 7 years. So this is a City of Los Angeles ballot measure that would mandate that the city automatically implement its own already adopted mobility plan whenever streets are repaved. We've gotten a lot of press recently. As I mentioned, the LA Times, we were in Bloomberg last week, and Spectrum News 1 covered us last week as well. And our coalition is growing. We've added 9 new organizations since last month, including yesterday, the Sierra Club, as well as business, labor, climate, and mobility justice organizations. And we've added 16 neighborhood councils. For context, it's only 99 total. So we've added 20%, nearly 20% of all neighborhood councils just in the last month. We now have 23 total supporting, and we think we're going to get to about 50%. And we have an office in North Hollywood, a full-time management team. We now have over 50 paid canvassers, over 120 volunteers. And as of now, we've now raised a little over $750,000. So it's a serious effort, and we are going to qualify this thing. And we have until May 27th to turn in 65,000 valid signatures from registered voters in the city of Los Angeles. So you can learn more at healthystreetsla.com. You can sign up to volunteer, you can sign up to sign the petition, and you can apply for a job. We are hiring as many talented people that aren't scared to talk to strangers as we can get our hands on right now. I'm going to turn over to Katrina to talk about some candidate endorsements in Council District 5.
Thanks, Michael. Before I get to that, I say that my bill that I'm most excited about is one of ours. It's the leading pedestrian intervals bill. As a pedestrian, I know that every time a leading pedestrian interval head start has been implemented in an intersection, I get so excited, and it's just going to make our cities safer all throughout the state. And I'm really hoping for it to pass. I'm here to talk about our CD5 candidate endorsements. This is the first endorsement that we've made for this election cycle. That was a couple of weeks ago. If you go to the next slide, you'll see that just at the very end of March, we endorsed both Scott Epstein and Jiffy Bimbars for City of LA Council District 5, which covers the West LA area, which is where I'm living as well. Our endorsement process includes a questionnaire. We send it out to all the candidates, and those who respond are then evaluated by the steering committee, and we're really pleased to support both of these wonderful candidates. I'm going to turn it over to Adriane next.
Thanks, Katrina. Before I talk about our upcoming debates, I'll share with you the state bill that I'm most excited about. It is SB 457, the one for tax rebates for being car-free. I think that the state needs to be more proactive with trying to encourage people to go without a car. It's frustrating hearing things like $400 rebates for people who own a car because of high tax, but nothing for those who are doing the right thing and not driving. So this is going to be a great bill. So we have a couple of debates coming up. The first one is for the candidates in Council District 9, and that will be on Monday, April 25th. The debate will be between Kern Price and Dulce Vasquez. Please RSVP. The link is on the screen for that. And then following that, on May 3rd, we have a debate for the CD15 candidates, Brian Dodega, Danielle Sandoval, and Tim McOsker. That starts at 5:30 on May 3rd. To RSVP, just visit the link on the screen. And I will get started with the wins of the month. We recently saw a new protected bike lane on Riverside Drive. This is really exciting. 0.6 mile stretch of Riverside between Los Feliz Boulevard and Glendale Boulevard. And this is a really important corridor because it's immediately southeast of Griffith Park. We want to thank Councilmember Nithya Raman for being proactive and doing this. We endorsed her in the last election cycle because of how well she scored on our candidate survey about installing things like protected bike lanes. Councilmember Raman clearly gets how important this is, and we look forward to seeing more protected bike lanes like this in the future in both CD4 and throughout the rest of the city. And here are some before and after photos. This is what Riverside Drive looked like before the protected bike lane was installed. It's a very wide street, 3 lanes on each side. I don't know if you've ever biked down the street. I have, and it sucks. It's really scary. And this is what it looks like now after the bike lane has been installed. It's a lot safer. I can't wait to bike down this. I feel that this is going to be just a much more enjoyable experience to bike down this. And now I'm going to toss it over to Katrina to talk about the Beautiful Boulevard project.
Thanks, Adriane. Our last one of the month is, as Adriane mentioned, the Beautiful Boulevard project, which is going through Eagle Rock. This is a campaign that Streets for All was supporting, along with a number of other organizations, to get a complete street down this area. And, you know, finally, after a lot of back and forth, Councilmember Kevin De Leon in the 14th district finally approved it. You can see in the renderings, there's that beautiful center running BRT, protected bike lane, and hopefully this will go a long way towards making that stretch of the city a more livable, safe, pleasant place to be. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Michael.
Katrina, quick preview for next month. We're excited to have Mayor Dr. Daniel Lee, Mayor of Culver City, and that will be May 12th at 5 p.m. So really excited to have Senator Anthony Portantino, who represents Senate District number 25. I'm going to read a very brief introduction, and then I think he has a couple minutes of words for us, and we'll get started with Q&A. So Senator Portantino represents California's 25th state Senate District, which stretches along the 210 freeway from Sunland to Hunga to Upland. He personally negotiated the end of the 710 freeway tunnel with the Brown administration and authored SB 7, which formally ended the threat of the freeway, protected the nonprofits in the 710 corridor, and paved the way for Pasadena to develop the dormant freeway stub. As a council member in La Cañada Flintridge, Portantino initiated a Trails Protection Master Plan, supported the Sierra Club's vision for the Angeles Crest Forest, preserves and expanded open space and the regional trail network, and served as the vice chair of the Santa Monica Conservancy Advisory Committee. This year, the senator has been working collaboratively with Streets for All on important bike and pedestrian-friendly legislation, and he has authored bills to create more affordable housing, including SB 932, which requires cities to plan and implement bicycle and pedestrian plans and traffic calming measures in their deadliest streets. SB 457, which is going to be introduced soon, that would give a tax rebate for every adult in a tax household without a car. And SB 1079, which would authorize local governments to utilize vehicle sound activated enforcement devices. Welcome, Anthony. It's so great to have you here. And please feel free, the floor is yours for a few minutes, and then we'll get to our Q&A. And you're on mute.
I say thank you, Michael, and thank you everybody for putting this together. Really happy to be here. Some of you know I'm a recent convert from sitting on the couch for 4 decades. In the last year and a half, I've actually become a biker, and so it's been great education for me, just being out there at the ground level, just seeing where we need to improve and being aware of it. And I'm very pleased that Michael and Bubba and your team reached out to me last year to sit down and talk about issues and ideas. I think that's probably the biggest thing I say to folks is, politics is a dialogue. Government should be a dialogue, and the role of the activists is important. And so that's the lens I use. I'm a dad, and so I try to legislate, from a dad's perspective, and try to be open to the conversation, and love my district and really enjoy what I do, working on a gamut of things from education now to bike safety and gun control, and happy to be here to take your questions.
Really appreciate you being here. So I'm going to take the first question. You recently became a vocal advocate for safe streets after taking up cycling during the pandemic, and wondering if you could expand on how did the experience of cycling regularly through the San Gabriel Valley impact your thoughts on transportation policy?
Well, when I was on the city council, we did some bike lanes along Descanso Drive, and we tried to expand. And it was interesting. We got pushback from neighbors, and I always thought that was interesting. We were making the street safer, but I didn't walk anywhere. I was 314 pounds, so I didn't walk anywhere or ride anywhere. And so, being on the bicycle, 25 to 40 miles a day, you see things. You see probably the most dangerous intersection I see is the one right in front of my house, which I still haven't figured out the best way to navigate it. I avoid it in like 4 different directions just to get home. And so it's really given me a lot of experiences. Sacramento has, you just showed the before and after photos. Sacramento, as I ride around there as well, has some great dedicated bike lanes, separated by bollards and parking. And, you get to see design features that work well. And it's just given me a better perspective to, be a better legislator with firsthand experiences.
Are there bills that you previously didn't support that maybe you would now support given that firsthand experience? Has it really changed your thinking?
Well, I've always been an advocate. I don't think you guys, let me back up. So as the chair of the Appropriations Committee, sometimes there are bills that I hold in my committee based on the fiscal impact, not on the design or the merit of the bill. I chair a fiscal committee. And so, I'm not going to say that every single, pro, design bill got through my committee, but that's not indicative of my policy position on those bills. But I've tried to be an advocate for mass transit, the goal line in particular. Getting people out of their cars has always been a goal of mine. Expanding the light rail around, Southern California is critical. But it's given me, I think, a greater understanding on the safety side of it. The real danger zone. So it's not colloquial. I've seen it I've fallen myself, and I've had near hits. Actually, some of those on the rural roads in Sacramento, when the guys towing the boats go by me, I got, my side view mirror just nicked me the other day. So it's given me that real, the life and death aspect of it, which is why our bill has, data on accidents, why we have a private right of action in the bill. If you're a city that doesn't, if you're a city and the danger zone and you don't cure it, you should be on the hook. Now, the interesting thing, that's where we're getting the most pushback, is on the private right of action, but I think that gives the bill a lot of teeth. By the way, we're going to have to fight it in the next committee. I'm already hearing some word out of the transportation committee that some of the staff doesn't like the private right of action. So it's one of the things I'm going to talk about on Monday when I go up there. But I think that life and death piece of it is really hit home with being out on the street, and obviously venturing across many communities. A month ago, I was riding through Arcadia, and I marveled at some of their pedestrian and bike friendly approaches. And then San Gabriel Valley active SGV told me, yeah, they had gotten a grant to do all that. So again, you see the connection of the resources to the implementation, which I know is one of your biggest frustrations, is LA's made this wonderful plan and then isn't implementing it. And so that's what we have to make sure, that we put resources and incentives, or both, to get this stuff done. But when you drive from one community to another community, you really see firsthand who's being bike friendly and who's not. Because as you cross a border, the things change.
Great, thank you. Katrina, over to you.
Thanks. So, Senator, you bring up a good point about, funding mechanisms. And I'm here to ask, as the chair of the Appropriations Committee, you have a lot of say over the budget. So could you please expound on which funding mechanisms are available to improve our infrastructure, and what can members of the public that care about active transportation and transit projects do to advocate for funding? Given that we spend billions of dollars widening roads in the state despite the climate crisis and what we know about induced demand in those cases, how do you think California can accelerate the transition from incentivizing driving to incentivizing alternative modes?
Well, those are two sort of connected questions. The first is, how do we influence the process? And that, you're doing it tonight. Everybody on this call is getting involved. But how many of you have your legislators on their cell phone? How many of you have your council members' personal emails? Don't be shy asking for those things and interacting, with your representatives and letting them know your perspective. I mean, people stop me in the grocery store, when I'm buying bread. I get stopped when I'm filling up my car. That's because everybody in my district knows me. And so, they're not shy coming up. And, I've knocked on probably 35,000 doors in my career. And, people know me. Establish those direct relationships and articulate why it's important when we prioritize to make sure we spend our resources on bike and pedestrian safety. And I think the gas crisis, one of the reasons why I agreed to carry the incentive bill for, if you give up your car, to get compensated. We have to create some of those economic incentives that will create more public policy decisions. So, there's a role for the activist community. As appropriations chair, yes, I have, influence. The other piece of the puzzle is, oftentimes when I let a bill out of committee, I put language in the bill that says subject to a budget appropriation. And so we have to work it on both sides. It has to get through my committee, but then we also have to make sure that there's resources behind it. And sometimes you'll see in the governor's veto message, he'll veto something and say, this is best taken up during the budget discussion next year. So you have to have both. You have to have the policy and the fiscal tied together. And so that's why working and prioritizing these things through the process is important, because we don't want to get something all the way through August and not have it in the budget. And then it doesn't happen. So going back to, our bill 932, I've already been talking to the budget staff. I made it, one of my top budget priorities. I've talked to the governor's office. I've talked to the budget subcommittees, trying to get everybody to understand that when we program our transportation dollars, that we reserve some of it for bike and pedestrian implementation. So I don't get a veto message in September saying, great idea, but there's no money.
Just a quick follow on. Do you think the current system we have is functional? Does it function well? Basically, cities asking Caltrans and the state for money in the form of grants for specific projects. Would it be better to have either more local control or some sort of non-grant way of funding transportation?
Well, yeah, in a perfect world, cities have enough resources to pay for, as you said, how many miles of road they pave. In a perfect way, the cities prioritize this with their general fund dollars. And then when we do pass statewide measures like SB1, which when we raise the gas tax, we should have prioritized these projects more. That's something where the legislature, we could have done a better job during the SB1 discussions to program more money, both on, because some of that SB1 dollars, cities got a direct allocation, Metro got a direct allocation, COGS, Council of Governments got it. So we spread a lot of money around. We should have been more prescriptive in how we allocated that money to implement what we wanted. We just should have, frankly, that was a missed opportunity. And I'm just as responsible as everybody else that we didn't put more teeth into SB1 for alternative transportation. But the next time we do something like that, we've got to be more prescriptive. But you're right. In a perfect world, cities allocate their resources. In an imperfect world, everybody's competing for the limited transportation dollars, and that's where we as advocates have to have a seat at the table.
Senator, it's a pleasure to have you on here. And so in 2008, a bill passed requiring cities to include the needs of pedestrians, transit users, and cyclists in their general plans. 12 years later, as we talked about, traffic violence in California is worse than it's ever been in decades. And we're really grateful to be working with you on SB 932, which would require, as you mentioned, cities to actually implement traffic calming measures on their deadliest streets, among other things in their actual general plans. One of the hardest things about this bill has been finding the enforcement mechanisms, and you mentioned this a little bit. So how do we, and I mean the kind of collective we of Streets for All, you and us as individuals, make sure our cities take our traffic violence and climate change seriously and actually implement these changes, which is in their power and very easily able for a city to do?
Well, I think that's where the private right of action comes into effect. I mean, that creates a responsibility with consequences if cities don't act. And like I said, it's going to be the hardest piece of the bill. Obviously the resources element of it, we want to make sure that cities don't have the excuse anymore saying we don't have the money to do it. What I always say, they love it to death. We don't want cities to love it to death. We want cities to do it to prevent death. And so the resources are important, but we also need to keep the accountability in there. And when you guys first pitched it, it's data driven. It gives an opportunity for them to fix the problems, and then there's a hammer if they don't. And I think for the 24 people on this call, the bill has my name on it, but you guys came up with that architecture for the bill, and it was very well crafted. So we have to fight for it. I mean, in the Senate Transportation Committee hearing, it's going to be a battle because there are already people trying to take the accountability out of it.
Thank you, Senator. And also will echo that it's a pleasure to have you here. And I got, I think, the most fun question, the question that you probably knew you were going to get. And we would be remiss not to bring up in a room full of mobility advocates. So last year, you were open about why you killed a bill we supported, AB 1401,
Never heard of that bill.
which would
What
have
does it do?
and it would have abolished parking minimums near transit. Your concern, you're open about your concern there that developers would profit and housing would remain expensive. A new version of that bill is back as AB 2097, and we are supporting it again this year. And we've had a lot of conversations with your office on the bill. So thank you for being available to talk about it. It's been great talking to you about this, and we've talked, and from our perspective, what we've talked to you about is how parking requirements not only drive up the cost of all housing, affordable or otherwise, but beyond that, there's environmental consequences. They incentivize driving. They're incredibly harmful to the environment. And we know you've introduced your own parking reform bill this year to try to impact that. So we want to know, since you introduced this bill, how has your thinking on the subject evolved?
Well, first of all, I really appreciate you guys reaching out to me to discuss it. Because, frankly, that's why I ended up introducing 1067, because, the collective comment is, all right, Portantino, you didn't like 1401. What's your solution? What's your approach? And I thought our conversation was very productive. And, something that came out of it was certainty, making sure that whatever gets done, the developers have some certainty. And so for me, and it's not just me, there's two sort of schools of thought out there. Clearly, if you build a building without having the construction costs of parking, the construction costs are going to be less and the rents are going to be less. That doesn't necessarily mean they're affordable, just means they're less expensive than what they would have been had you built the parking. And so from the affordability side, there are people who want more affordable housing, not just less expensive luxury housing. And that seems to be where the disagreement or the convergence of the thoughts come in. Even the LA Times, when it did its editorial about a month ago, said LA needs housing at every price level, but it needs affordable housing more than everything else. And so that's always been my sort of bent, is making sure that when we do use the state's pen, when we do implement these sweeping policies, we have accountability. We make sure we get what we want out of the end game. And, I've said it to you guys before, I am a little bit afraid of, gentrification and building really, upscale apartments that might be less, but still out of reach for, regular average people out there, and certainly not affordable for those folks who need housing the most. And so that's what I've been trying to focus on through 1067, is sort of having a two-pronged approach to solve the problem. One is, if you do affordable, you have an easier path of approval. And two, if you make sure that you're not going to negatively impact that community's ability to do affordable housing, and there's adequate parking in the area, having a second, bite at the apple. So I'm trying to hit the sweet spot, because there are a number of my colleagues that are very concerned about just the blanket doing away with parking. I know it's become vogue to sort of say, everything goes through me, so therefore I'm the boogeyman. But I also, and for those of you who will love this, when I say that I have, I try to be the mature adult in the room and make sure everybody's perspective is respected. It's true. I can't tell you how many people come up to me and share their views, and I wish the policy committees would hash this stuff out more. But a lot of things get punted to me without having that full conversation during the policy committee. I have a bill right now where a policy committee passed it to the Senate floor, and then the consultants came to my consultants and said, can he call it to appropriations because we didn't fix it? And of course I said, no, you already sent it to the Senate floor. I'm not going to pull a bill that you had an opportunity to fix that doesn't really have a fiscal impact. That's not my job. But, the bills that do come to me, there's broad perspective on these things. So I'm trying to be thoughtful. I'm trying to be pragmatic. And frankly, you guys have moved me significantly through our conversations. And, whether it's workforce housing, student housing, we've included those things in the bill to try to get more of an incentive to get the affordability piece. The other interesting thing is, I think both sides have things they like and don't like in the bill. I think the hardcore affordable housing activists think I've gone too far. And so, from my perspective, if I've got both ends a little bit uncomfortable, I'm probably getting close to the sweet spot. But clearly, when you guys reached out to me, it's made a difference. And, I think it was a fair request. You killed the bill. What's your alternative? And so that's what I'm trying to craft. What I find fascinating is there are still folks who, send me pictures of people being hung and call me a murderer, and not you guys, but there are people who still go after me because I'm offering an alternative when, last year their whole point was, what are you going to do? And so I'm just trying to be thoughtful. I think I answered your question, but if I didn't, come back with a follow-up.
You did. I have a follow-up, but you did answer my question. I appreciate that. And I think everyone at Streets for All appreciates that you clearly are coming at this wanting to explore this topic and, really make sure we're making the right decision here. And I appreciate also you articulating the need for all types of housing, though not, Streets for All, we typically don't wade into housing specific issues, but, this impacts housing affordability, and it impacts our environment, and it impacts the safety of our streets when we're incentivizing people to only drive a car as the easiest method of transportation. So, I appreciate you saying we need housing of all kinds. I think there are probably a lot of people on this call that consider themselves affordable housing advocates. I am myself. I definitely consider myself that. And I know the need for our most vulnerable neighbors to get housing is pretty intense. So, we see parking minimums of any kind as being harmful to that goal across the spectrum of housing. So we recently commissioned a RAND report, which actually corroborated the findings of these studies that building less parking lowers the cost of all types of housing, which can slow gentrification. I heard you talk about gentrification in your response there. So I'm curious if your thinking has evolved on that issue, specifically gentrification, since you started tackling the topic and since that report came to you.
No, I read the RAND study. There are compelling arguments in it. I'm just, relying on the free market has me a little bit nervous. I'm much more of an FDR Democrat, where you define what you want, you fund it, and you build it. So you say we want X number of units, I just like that. I just am more comfortable prescribing the outcome and then holding people accountable to get there than sort of the free market approach. And I think this is delicate, because as you know, when you build it, even if it's less expensive to start, over time, those rents are going to rise. And I'm working with a coalition of folks on first-time homebuyer incentive programs for folks who've never owned a home, coming up with an actual subsidy to help people buy their first home to create wealth. When I talk to, children of first-generation Californians, they want to own a home. They want, there's a whole group of folks out there, working people who want to live in California and be able to afford to do it. That's outside of sort of, what I would call, well, we said gentrification. I mean, so I'm just a little nervous, and it's a big decision. Once we put it into law, it's in law. And so I don't mind people getting a little bit mad at me, or even a lot mad at me, for dragging this conversation out and trying to hit the sweet spot, because if we don't get it right, I'm nervous. So I want to get it right. And so if I can massage and create sort of a dual track to give people an incentive to do affordable and an incentive to do what you guys want, if I can hit that sweet spot, I'll feel good.
Thank you,
But
Senator.
I do appreciate it, and I do read everything you guys send me. So the more we talk, the better we do.
Well, now we need your advice. So last year we supported 4 bills which were ultimately vetoed by the governor. They included decriminalizing jaywalking, legalizing the Idaho safety stop, which was known as the California safety stop. And we were just gutted when it happened. We worked so hard to get it through the Senate and Assembly. You know the governor pretty well. Do you have any advice on how to get him to support progressive transportation ideas? And how can advocates, not just us in Streets for All, but advocates in general, work better with him to ensure different outcomes in the future, including this year?
Well, it's a great question. And, frankly, I've used his vetoes as a reason why he should fund our bill, saying, don't go another year and not show respect to the biking and pedestrian community. So I've tried to use that to our strategic advantage to make sure we get resources to implement. But I think part of it is working with his staff, developing relationships with his staffers as well, his policy people on those issues, making sure, you invite them. And that's where we can, if you don't know who his staff people are, we can identify them for you and try to set up direct conversations. You got to think, I mean, in my case, I represent 1 million people. I get pulled in 1,000 directions. He represents 40 million people. He gets pulled in 1 million different directions. So trying to get those folks who are close to him, because, obviously he's going to make decisions, based on talking to his circle of folks when he sits down with his pen. And so we need to target some of those folks to see who has his ear on these subjects. Like any of us, there are people we talk to and get advice, like I do with you guys now. When there's an issue, I pick up the phone and I text you and ask your thoughts. We have to figure out who's whispering in his ear on those subjects, and we need to get them up to speed. When I did Late Start, his staff wanted to see all the research, and I gave them 35 years of research on school start time, and we were able to convince him, because remember, Jerry Brown vetoed it, and then Gavin signed it. So we really need to figure out who he's listening to on those subjects. I don't think it's because he doesn't care about bike and pedestrian safety. I think it's whoever spoke to him down the stretch made those arguments, and he went along with them.
Thank you. Over to Adriane. Adriane, I think you're on mute.
Oh, you're still on mute, Adriane.
Sorry about that.
No problem.
As the chair of the Senate Appropriations Committee, you yield a lot of power in the state, and the fate of many promising pieces of legislation depends on you. We are supporting a bill that would create a free public transportation program for anyone under 25 years old, and another bill that would do the same thing for low-income families. These programs obviously require funding, but we see them as paramount to creating the necessary mode shift we need to address our climate and traffic violence crisis. Do you support these measures to make public transit free? And what can you do in your role to support them?
So I support public transit very much. I mean, like I said, the goal line through the San Gabriel Valley is one of my pet projects that I've been pushing for decades, and really wanted to connect all the way to the Ontario airport. I mean, imagine being able to hop on a light rail and go to an international airport, instead of driving to LA. I think it would be extremely well used. So I definitely support mass transit. And I know there are a number of proposals to make public transportation free. We've done it for students, started with community college students. I've typically supported all of those efforts. The question is going to be whether there's a companion in the budget or not. That's why I can't say definitively whether the bill will get out or not, because it depends on what the budget does on that front, if that makes sense. It may be one of those things where I put, subject to a budget allocation, but philosophically, anything that gets people out of their cars and in mass transit, I have traditionally supported through my whole time in public office. By the way, that's my wife calling me on the other line, and I'm not going to pick it up.
We are
I'm with
honored.
Streets. I'm with Streets for All for an hour. She's got to wait.
This is being recorded. I just want to let you know that.
I understand.
Um,
So hopefully she won't see that.
We won't tweet the link to her. So we have a few audience Q&A, and I'm going to go ahead and get this back on. And here is our first question. I live in Pasadena. In your district in Pasadena, there is often vocal opposition to mechanisms like traffic slowing and bike lanes. Do you hear a lot of your constituents voicing support or opposition to you? And what is your messaging to constituents who are opposed?
So, you always, I shouldn't say. So when I'm with one group of folks, they're going to talk about their cars. And when I just joined PAA, which has 400 members. It's a Pasadena based, bike club. And from the moment I went on my first ride with them, they've been talking about the governor's vetoes. So, I think there's a growing wind in Pasadena on more bike and pedestrian friendly approaches. I know with One Arroyo and what we're trying to do with the stub, there's a lot more focus on trying to make it pedestrian friendly. What I tell people is I use my personal story. I was not as invested in the day-to-day safety issue as I am now when I see it up front and personal. And so, I tell everybody the best way to advocate is to tie it to a personal story. And so that's the messaging is, make it personal.
Thank you.
And Pasadena, as you know, has districts. So, get to know the council members in each district, and just like Streets for All is doing in LA, get involved in their inner circle. Sorry, I added that.
Problem. And Claire, run for office, run for council.
There you go.
That's how they really
Exactly.
change things. All right. This is not a question, but it was a nice sentiment, and I thought we'd show it to you. Jonathan just wants to congratulate you on meeting your health goals, welcoming you to the world of cycling as daily transportation, and ask that you continue to support it.
Thank you, John. I've lost 160 pounds, Jonathan.
That's amazing.
That is pretty amazing. Next up, don't know if you have any information about this project, but Carnegie Institute relocating to Pasadena. Can you provide more information on this exciting project, the status and the exact location?
So my understanding is it's going to be on Green, somewhere close to Caltech. It's very exciting. And actually, I've met with them a number of times, and the governor put $20 million in the budget to help facilitate the move. They're building a $150 million campus, and they're relocating all of their climate science from all around the country. They're relocating like 3 or 4 different locations around the country, and going to have this one science hub in Pasadena. It's very exciting. And so I'm fully supportive of it. And I was pleased, based on actually my suggestion, the governor put money in the budget to help the move. So it's really cool. And they're going to affiliate with Caltech, and bringing that level of climate science and smart people to Pasadena is good for not just Pasadena, but the state of California. So it's real, it's happening. And I think it's $150 million total, and 250 scientists are coming our way.
I believe it's the intersection of Holliston and Green in Pasadena is where they're going. I'm not 100% on that.
Yeah, it's on Green. I didn't know what the cross street is, but it's on
like
Green.
About a block west of Hill.
Right.
Next question from August. If we don't reduce minimum parking minimums for developments, can we reduce street parking in city centers and add dedicated bus lanes or other uses? I know you don't directly control how cities use their space, but wanted to give you an opportunity to respond to this.
No, I mean, I think we all have to recognize, and we have to be advocates for the changing nature of mobility. And I think we just have to do more and more education. Every day I'm out there, I'm learning more. Who would have thunk it at 61 I could learn something? Don't tell my family.
Anthony, I want to ask you about the governor's proposal for the gas tax holiday. When we saw it, we were pretty taken aback, and it's sort of talking out of both sides of your mouth to say we're in a climate crisis and California needs to be a leader, and let's make it cheaper and incentivize more people to drive. And so just wanted to get your thoughts on that. Do you think that it's going to get done? Do you think that any of the alternatives that have been proposed by the legislature might happen? And just your thoughts in general.
You know, traditionally, and this is not the answer you want to hear, traditionally governors on some of these big ticket items, they tend to win more than they lose. That being said, the legislature has thrown a few elbows in the discussion, and there's strong support within both the Assembly and the Senate to not just embrace the proposal on the table. And so I think it's probably 50-50 that there will be a smaller version, more strategic. Obviously from the Senate side, they want to means test it, not, if we're going to give money, give it to the folks who need it the most. That to me is the biggest sentiment out there, tying it to economics. But you're right. I can't argue with the point of, should we use this as a teachable moment versus a political moment?
Why not give direct rebates to households instead of doing a gas tax that only benefits people that drive?
No, and all of those things are being discussed. So I don't think we've seen the final version of it. I think there is a lot of pushback from the legislature on it, and those conversations are happening. That being said, when people look at, $6 gas prices, there's a lot of folks that stop us in the supermarket, or when I'm filling up my car, people come up and really express their frustration with the high gas prices. Has it shifted in the mindset of that person? Well, maybe I should do away with their car. That's where the infrastructure, one of the things some of us are pushing is, let's, instead of giving $11 billion back, shouldn't we be expanding light rail? Shouldn't we be connecting bus lines? Shouldn't we be doing more infrastructure projects with that money? Because there's an incentive to get people out of their cars when they're paying $6.50 for a gallon. We should be using that. So that conversation is happening. And I can't tell you where the needle's going to fall, but he's definitely, if he had gotten what he wanted, it already would be law, right? We would have done it before break. The fact that we didn't do it before break shows that there's much more conversation around this subject. And you guys, leading the conversation is important.
Yeah, we seem to, as a country, like short-term fixes like that versus just investing in the infrastructure that would make it less painful next time gas prices go up, which is not something in our control.
And I will tell you, there's a bunch of my colleagues during those discussions that have been saying, why aren't we spending this money on infrastructure?
Yeah. Well, I think we are essentially out of time. Is there anything else you'd like to add or close with?
Well, just thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity to come talk to you guys and work with you. Your team has been great. As you know, you asked me to step up and I asked you to step up, and you guys have been part and parcel to the conversation. Now we got to get this stuff through and get it signed. I just want to leave you with one last sort of grassroots thing. The Glendale Environmental Coalition came to me with a fun little idea that I think is going to get through the process. I'm old enough to remember when you ate in a cafeteria in school, you ate on a plate and you had a knife and a fork and they washed it. And then in the 80s, they got rid of all the washing machines in schools because they went to single-use plastic and paper products. They said it was more sanitary. So the governor put $500 million in the budget to retrofit kitchens. And so Glendale Environmental Coalition said, why don't we go back and put dishwashers in every kitchen so we can go back to making schools greener, and there's a number of pilot programs that show how much paper and custodial work goes into the single-use trash thing. And so that's another little bill that came from a Zoom conversation that I think is going to become law. So I say it to encourage all of you to interact as much as possible with your representatives, because there's nuggets that come from these conversations and policy that gets changed. So keep doing what you're doing. So thank you.
Thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate your time. Thanks for everyone for attending, and we will see you guys next month with the mayor of Culver City. Have a good night,
There
everybody.
you go. Take care, everybody. Be well.
Call your wife.
Thank you, Senator.
All right.
There you go.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.